Hello and welcome back. I'll be making some lined tubing using the stick stack technique here on the Jasa channel. I'm applying a little bit of beeswax to my tube to help keep the sticks from sliding around. I'll hold them together temporarily with a few rubber bands. This will create a hollow cavity in the center, which I can melt together to form a tube. I probably couldn't go much smaller than this without melting the rubber bands. But if you're planning to use this technique more often, you could switch to something else more reusable, like a metal hose clamp. You might be able to put that in the kiln as well to preheat your sticks. But now I'll go ahead and open up the end of this tubing to flare it open for a hot seal connection. I'll be using a lot more of the second stage of my torch for this project. It will require a lot of heat to get the sticks fully melted in. And now it is possible on a single stage torch. However, it might take at least twice as long to finish the project. And so I don't really recommend this for the beginner lamp workers. Instead, maybe draw some lines on a tube using some colored stringers. But for my more advanced students, this can be quite a bit of fun. You can experiment with a wide range of colors to see what kind of patterns and effects you can get. And now you may want to be careful using two different colors with very different compositions. Something like a clear or light cobalt blue mixed with a dense sparkle color like Troutman's heavy blue leprechaun. Instead of melting smoothly together, you might find the clear glass encasing over the more dense one, which might actually look pretty cool. And so you don't really know until you experiment to see what you can come up with. And now I'm just connecting a couple of the ends to make sure they melt together instead of melting apart. Sometimes it's a fine line between the two. I'll go ahead and attach that tube I flared out earlier with a nice hot seal. Both ends glowing molten and attached in the flame. Whoa, I had one of the rubber bands fly off there. And now that I have the blow tube attached, I can pull out the other tubing and take off the rest of the rubber bands. And so the colors I'm working with here are Troutman Green Slime, a very nice fluorescent green, which can transition from opaque to transparent. The other clear looking rod is actually Pink Mai Tai. It's a light amber purple color. It will react in the flame and the kiln and begin to change from clear to amber and eventually to some blue and purple colors as well. You can see the color shift already happening in the center of the stack. Those colors come from a chemical reaction and the special metals mix into the glass. In lampworking, they call this process striking. Using a lighter saturated amber purple should help keep it from overstriking as I'm working with it. But I may need to strike it a couple times in the kiln once it's done to get the colors I'm looking for. And so I decided to attach another blow tube once I had that section fully melted in. I'll remove my first blow tube and finish melting in the other half. Until I get all the rods more fully melted in, it is liable to crack. I'm making sure to reheat my colder areas to keep it from cooling too quickly. I'll start pulling some glass from the end also. I want to remove all the clear from the blow tube, but also pull all the colored lines together so they all end at the same spot and sort of form into an X. Small details like that can be important. People often take a moment to flip the object around and look at the back or look at the bottom. And so you don't want to leave any blank spots. And so I'll start to puff this out to make a glass ornament. I'll have to close a couple holes here. By giving it a quick puff, I can kind of tell how much air pressure is leaking. And so right now it's almost completely solid. I can hold my hand about a foot or two away and blow into the vessel to figure out where that hole is at. I have to be very careful doing this as the air coming out is pretty hot. As most things you practice on, you tend to learn little tips and tricks as you go. Like I found out something kind of interesting while working on this project. If I put a rubber band on the other side of the stack, I can actually take the core completely out and it'll hold itself open. In construction, this is very similar to building an arch. The arch can redirect the downward force of gravity sideways into the surrounding area or the surrounding stones of the arch. So this allows the arch to hold itself up and support overhead weight as well. You can even use this phenomena to construct a bridge. However, you would need to build a temporary support system until the bridge is complete and able to support its own weight. And so my camera ran out of power there, and you missed a couple minutes of action. That happens sometimes. I am my own cameraman. I had a little issue with this color combination as well. The denser slime doesn't like to move as easily as the Mai Tai. I'm having to work a little slower to puff them out at the same rate. And now the top half of the ornament is done. I'm going to remove a little bit of glass, that way I can pop out a little hole. And I accidentally push a little hard and pop out some glass debris, some bubble trash. That wasn't intentional. It's always good to avoid bubble trash so you don't inhale it. Fortunately, it went its way up to the ventilation system, which is half the reason it's there. The other reason for the ventilation would be the byproducts of combustion, exhaust. It can be easy to forget about being invisible. A quick reminder as well, not to run your car in a closed garage or a gas-powered generator indoors. We're moving into winter, the colder season. I know people are going to try to stay warm, which can be nice in the shop as well to stay comfortable. The flame doesn't actually produce that much heat to warm the studio, especially with the powerful ventilation running. The glass can make a slight difference. Working on a large project, it can radiate out a lot of heat, almost like a very tiny star, like the sun. Or a brown dwarf, if you consider the temperature, which isn't a complete star, but gets close, just like this project getting close to finished. I've attached one last blow tube to the top to finish shaping the bottom. I know it might seem like a lot of technical work between attachments and detachments, but it's one of those things you don't really think about after you practice enough on it. It's almost like thinking about opening and closing a door. I try to stress the importance of general practice, just understanding the flame and understanding how the glass likes to flow when it's molten. And then when you have the feel for how the glass wants to work for you, then worry more about the techniques to get it more picture perfect. Sometimes I feel like the techniques are there as a beginner's guideline, sort of like a recipe to cooking. But like a recipe, it can definitely get you going in the right direction. And so I've pulled out quite a bit of extra glass just to bring those slime lines together into a nice point. This will be the very bottom of the globe. As I said before, it should look like a nice X, as all those slime lines terminate at the same point. This is sometimes referred to as the termination. And now that that's finished, I'll go ahead and heat up the bottom, give it one last puff to finish the entire shaping of the globe, and then attach a punty to the bottom to remove the blow tube from the top. As I'm doing these last steps, I want to make sure not to lose too much heat. Allowing your project to cool too quickly before it gets in the kiln could result in a crack. And in these cold weather conditions, it makes it even worse. And so if you don't have a heated studio, the best next step would be layers. Multiple layers of clothing to help insulate your body heat. You might have noticed I'm wearing 3 shirts and my coat. But besides that, what you don't see are my 2 pairs of socks. It's easy to forget about your feet even when they lose a lot of heat. I actually used this to my advantage during the summer months, which can be extra dangerous due to the risk of dehydration and heat exhaustion, which I felt like I was running into a slight case of when I was working on one of the hotter days. It felt like a quick wave of tiredness mixed with a little bit of weakness. And in these cases, it's best to take a break, get something to drink, maybe retire for the day altogether, depending on your situation. But I felt like maybe I'll just go ahead and take my shoes off. And that felt pretty good. So I thought maybe I'll go even further and take my socks off as well, and lay my feet down on the cold concrete floor. And that's when I realized the human body is actually a giant heat sink. A water-cooled one. As the heat begins to conduct out of my feet and into the ground, this not only cools off the surrounding tissue, but the veins, capillary veins, and arteries as well. This in turn cools the fluid, the blood, circulating through the body, which can then work its way through the warmer parts of the body, absorbing excess heat and transferring it back down to the colder areas, my feet, and warming them back up. So by just putting my bare feet on the ground, which I don't normally recommend for a glass shop, I was able to cool off everything else. And so when you do overheat, make sure you're not wearing too many insulating materials, and then find a cool place to cool down. And now I'm using some white glass to add a lip wrap. You basically draw a thin line around the edge. It's a nice little accent for the rim of whatever you're making. And now that it's finished, I'll knock it off my punty, melt out the last mark, and anneal it in the kiln for 2 hours. It'll take 5 or 6 hours to drop back down to room temperature after that. And so the amber purple didn't strike deep enough in the kiln. I'm going to put it back in to strike it a second time, let it cool, and strike it a third time. So you can see a large color shift from the first and second strike. However, the third was much more subtle, just a slight shift in the blue hues and opacity. And now we've reached the end of the stick stack. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to share it, along with my other videos on the channel. Don't be afraid to pick your favorite and post it on social media. That way others know where to find the Matt Jasa channel.